I'm Andrea Butcher, and this is Being at Work. Being a leader is hard. So on this show, I set out to talk with experienced leaders to learn from their pivotal moments, how they led through the challenges we can all relate to but are often unheard. Today, I'm joined by Terry Holloway, Senior Vice President and Chief Talent Officer at Strada Education Network. Strada is doing some really innovative work in the education space. They apply a unique combination of strategic philanthropy, research, and creative solutions to improve the college-to-career connection. And Terry's a critical part of their leadership strategy. Terry's been a cornerstone of the HR talent space in Central Indiana for many years, from his work at Sallie Mae, his tenure with Anthem, and his own consulting work. He knows what great leadership looks like. And today, he'll highlight the importance of humility. You know, we can easily get caught up in selfish thoughts such as, I'm not getting what I deserve right now, or why isn't this happening for me? Terry gives us insight into how to address that in the moment. He provides some great questions and helpful tips. Take a listen.
It's interesting when you will say get tenured in your career, you have a tendency to make some notes of things that really lead to success from a leadership standpoint, or people that have even been just greatly impactful. And I've just been super blessed to really work with some great leaders, at all the organizations I've worked at, good mentors, which in turn kind of led me to want to do a lot of that type of work in my life and career and being a mentor. So a couple that stand out really, there are sort of core competencies or, leadership competencies that really just jump out to me, and so as you think about even, over the course of your work and talent, you think about succession and leadership development and recruiting for, these competencies that work well for your organization. But it really, to me, it seems like there's some that have sort of risen up as just being good, solid leadership competencies that work for any organization. And one of them to me is just humility. Some of the greatest leaders that have had the most impact, regardless of industry that I've worked with, have sort of led with this. It's never about them, Andrea. It's always about what's good for the company, what's good for growing tomorrow's leaders. Seeing things in people that they know will lead them to personal success and drive the organization forward toward its annual goals and its mission. And somehow it's never about them. One leader I'm thinking about in particular, he's one of those sort of leaders, no matter who meets them, he has a tendency to be extremely impactful to them, and just always up, always in kind of a great mood, and always bringing sort of that that joyfulness of life and work to every conversation. And I remember sort of early on in my career at Anthem, and we were working on a particular, I think it was an executive hire, and he's an executive vice president at the time. And so I shot him a quick note and said, hey, I want to set up some time with you. I know that it may be a week or so until we can get on your busy calendar. And he literally shoots me a note back within, 2 minutes and said, hey, do you have time right now? We can talk. And I'm like, well, here's, one of the 6 most influential people in our organization. And he wants to make time for me when I have availability, and that's just kind of the way he led and really was dedicated to growing leaders in the right way, putting them in a position to succeed kind of based on what their personal competencies were. And, more than anything, Andrea, it was never about him. It was never about his personal success. It was never about his financial success. He was always, sort of taking those corporate goals and how could he drive his team forward. But even most importantly, like I've mentioned, how can I, find opportunities for the right people at the right time on my team to meet those goals? And he was just super impactful. I know to more than just me, and through downsizings and right sizings and bad economy and all those kind of things, he was always a go-to leader in the organization. To this day, he still mentors a lot of folks that I know.
So it sounds like that humility really drew people to him, created connection. Do you believe, Terry, that humility is something that can be developed? Was that part of who he is? How does a leader go about developing greater humility?
It's a great question. And I do think it can be developed. I think that naturally there are some people that, are more sort of designed to serve, I guess. But I do think through good mentorship, people can have an understanding of how they impact others when they see, sort of through the lens of that mentor or leader that can offer just good advice to them. And I think it all comes down to those influential leaders really just pointing out certain behaviors, maybe with somebody that sort of lacks humility, again, maybe early on in their career, trying to, find a foothold in the organization. Sometimes people have a tendency to want to draw attention to themselves or at least point out sort of good projects or anything like that. And what I found is, those leaders are really important at that time, in those individuals' careers, because they can point out sort of, hey, here's what this looks like. Here's what you're kind of telling the organization when you draw attention to yourself. Or, I think that when they can sort of show that behavior in ways that has really benefited others, and what it really means to sort of not have humility and not show that, I think they have a way of, especially if they respect the mentor or the leader that may be giving them advice, if they can put it in sort of practical behavioral ways that are really sort of easy to understand and really even show the benefits and point out other leaders that exemplify that, I think it can be learned. But I think it's harder for some than others. Those behaviors are sort of hard to unlearn if they've seemingly been beneficial in the past. But I do believe that people can learn and grow from that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because the behaviors of humility, I think a lot of times when leaders have more security and more confidence, that's when they're in a position to focus more on others. So sometimes it's a bit contrary to what you might think.
Well, I think you hit on something important there, and that's confidence. And confidence is interesting because I've seen a lot of folks in my advanced tenure. I've seen a lot of folks that have had confidence, and it is a trait that is a go-to in an organization. When you sort of exude that confidence, people sort of naturally want to follow you. So I think that when you sort of pair that up, confidence and humility, they're really two traits that that can really lead to the best results. I've seen confident leaders that are very, very good at what they do. They're really confident, but maybe they sort of don't exude some of those other, leadership qualities like humility or selflessness or sort of being united and collegial and wanting to bring the team along with them, those sorts of things. And they get good results, but maybe not the best. And I've seen leaders that have great humility that just are, sort of that selfless nature to them. They're, may be really good on a team, but maybe they don't have great confidence. Maybe they're, so you're just excited to, to just participate and lead a small team or whatever. But I think, when you see those two things paired, you have something really powerful. You have something, maybe when things are not good with corporate results or whatever, but confidence really sort of leads them through that. And a leader can, can really sort of drive their team in a way that has them believe that they're doing what's right. It's just other forces are sort of working against them. And then sort of, if they see that they're sort of not about themselves and they're all about the team and, in a unified way, and they have sort of that expertise that exudes confidence and has the others sort of believing in them in that way, it can be really powerful results, especially when either the economy is not great or maybe the business cycle is not good. Those things have a way of really leading through those obstacles.
Absolutely. Have there been, if you think about times in your career, have there been times when it's harder to demonstrate those leadership characteristics?
Yeah, I think especially confidence, because there's things that happen, whether it's, organization decisions, especially if you work for large organizations. I mean, there's just going to be, challenges with, standing up a new operation, an acquisition, economic downturn, whatever it may be. You can let those things sort of impact you personally. Maybe you are at that point in your career as a leader or, as an individual contributor where things should be happening for you, right? I mean, it's, I've got enough tenure now. I've been here long enough. Why am I not getting that promotion? Or why am I not seeing things happen for me? I'm not getting good projects. I'm, sort of being left out of the information loop. Well, sometimes those things are out of your control. And I think if you just, sort of have that good base of confidence that, you do good work and sort of seek others' opinions and those kind of things and remain humble through it. I really do think that they can kind of lead you through difficult challenges. I can share a story about that sort of personally. I worked for an organization at the time that, there was a significant economic downturn. There have been a couple of them in my career. And I was at a point where I really believed that, I really should kind of have that next level promotion. And, I share this and sort of humbly because it was one of those situations where, I really felt like, based on what I was hearing and all these sorts of things, that I should have had a bigger role by then. But it was sort of less about me, really. I mean, it was one of those things that we just talked about, Andrew, where it's like, it's not about you. It's about sort of this company finding its footing to really, drive forward and grow in the wake of a bad economy. And so, so again, I just had great mentors. I was and am very blessed in my career to have just great people that, that can kind of share the bigger picture to say, look, I mean, you're going to have patience, and the organization doesn't feel any less about you. You haven't done anything differently, but you need to sort of just, continue to do great work and find new ways to get involved, to sort of stretch laterally. I think those are things, Andrew, you and I have talked about in the past. I mean, good lateral opportunities are just immeasurably important to your career. Broaden your skills and do things that you may even find that you enjoy even more than the job that you thought you wanted to sort of capstone your career. So, through that, again, I learned a lot. It's not always about us, right? It's about sort of, continuing to grow and continuing to learn and bring people. And the other thing too, I think that's super important is during those times, you can always look for ways to give back and mentor others and think about bringing others along in your organization. It's a good time to sort of work on succession. As a leader, do you have folks in your organization that are ready to pick up, things that you can kind of share with them to grow them in the right way that, will really exemplify their strengths, those kinds of things that will make the organization even better. So it's not always, sort of waiting in line, I guess, for the next great opportunity. That's advice that I try to give to others is always look for ways to grow other than, sort of what you see as trajectory up. And I can tell you that, at organizations I've worked at in the past, larger organizations where I've had the opportunity to, to sort of take on more laterally or even take a step down, it's just been immeasurably important to my career. I can give you another example. So, at one point in my career, I'd never really had any kind of exposure to leadership development or associate development. Had been in most corners of human resources, but not direct exposure for programs that develop leaders. And I was approached by my boss at the time and said, "Hey, I really, want you to think about this, taking this on." And I'm like, "Well, I really don't have that kind of experience, and so I don't know that I could sort of be confident and bring what I would want to." To bear for the organization. And, I just, again, great leader, great mentor at the time said, "Look, it's all hard work, but, you're capable of it. I'll have good support for you. I'll provide whatever resources you need to do it. I just think this is what the organization needs right now." And so kind of begrudgingly, I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Andrew, it's the most fun part of my job that I'm doing today is having the opportunity to partner with my team and develop leaders for Strada. The organization really needs it. We're the type of organization where we're changing pretty dramatically, and it's exactly what we need right now. If I hadn't sort of listened to my leader at the time, I wouldn't have, any of that exposure right now to bring it to bear for Strada today. So it was a good lesson for me. Again, it kind of wasn't about me. It was about what the organization needed. And by the way, I happened to stumble across something that I'm really pretty passionate about and really pretty excited about. So that was a good lesson for me. And I'm glad that, I had a patient leader that worked with me through it.
Oh gosh, so many good things there. So 2 stories you shared. I am hearing a lot of connection points in those stories, over and over, Terry. The couple of questions that you keep asking that get you out of a focus of yourself. So questions like, what does the organization need? What about the people around me? What can I do to them? What about leaders who are leading me? How can I learn from them through this situation? So that's really helpful. You talked about in the first story that you told, you talked about you were feeling like things should be happening. They weren't. And you realized that. So I want to dig into that a little bit because I think that awareness is so important. Humility is a tough one sometimes to get your arms around because in the moment, I think it's tough to realize, oh, I'm not being humble right now, when you're hooked by something like things should be happening for me and they're not. So tell me a little bit more about that awareness. How did you come to that?
It is a tough one, as you mentioned, because I think we're all sort of naturally, programmed to, to want more, to impact more. I mean, I think it's exemplified in different ways, right? And, for nonprofit organizations, you meet leaders that really want to, that have a connection to the mission. I mean, in recruiting here, I wondered coming in how challenging it would be. It is in certain regards, but in others, it's not, because it's sort of less about financial rewards and really more about connectedness to the mission. And so with those individuals, what really sort of drives them is being able to kind of impact the mission more. And sometimes that translates to, I want to stand up this this new function within my department, and maybe the organization is not ready for that. And so somebody that's sort of selfless, a leader that's not about themselves, would be like, okay, we're going to curb this. We're going to fight this another day. I'm going to park this over here on the shelf, and we're going to try that. Maybe somebody that's a little less humble and more about themselves and sort of driving impact would be, hey, look, this is my opinion, is that this organization needs this now. I'm going to fight for this. And, it's sort of less about team and more about my opinion here. I've seen some of that in my career. I've worked for other nonprofits as well. And it just doesn't go over well. I mean, it sends a message internally that, this leader's opinion and how they sort of, value their group should supersede anything else that's going on in the organization. And finance should get behind them and support them and realize that their opinions will drive the mission forward more so than others. Even just talking about this, you can hear it, right? That's for a nonprofit organization that, they may sort of all be like-minded, but lack of humility can really sort of derail the the overall mission or the submission of the department too. And in for-profit organizations, it's a little more obvious because you have sort of more financial opportunity for personal growth and personal wealth, and it's sort of more overt. It's more obvious. And I would hear this sort of a lot in the for-profit organizations I've worked for. Leaders would come to me and they're just like, look, I just want to be a VP. I just want to be a VP. I'm like, a VP of what? What makes sense for you? And he's like, I really don't care. I just want to be a VP. I'm like, and the counsel would be, well, what really goes along with that besides a new business card? And he's like, well, yeah, I just know there's financial rewards, there's status in it. I've always wanted to be a VP. And so, we would have to kind of dig into that and say, okay, well, if it were, vice president of an organization that, that you really just don't understand, or that maybe you disagree with, or not lying within your strengths, is that okay? Well, probably not. Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense for you. So, we would always try to find an intersect point there and say, here are your, obvious strengths. You're awesome at these things. Here are the things that you really enjoy doing that we just talked about. What kind of paths in that regard sort of, lead you to where you want to be career-wise? And, the rhetoric might have been, well, there's sort of no VP jobs in that. And, and then me or someone on my team would share a story about someone that, came through the organization and were so good and so impactful. And you could really see them driving results in an area that they really were passionate about and really enjoyed, again, right in their wheelhouse strength-wise. And by the way, they elevated that person to a VP level because they were so good at it and so impactful that the organization didn't want to lose them and recognized, maybe the organization didn't even recognize how important that function was until that person got in it and really just killed it, And so those are some of the conversations that we would have that really kind of got back to, being much more sort of humble about their career and recognizing that it's, they've got great strengths and they have interests, that stuff that they love doing, and find that intersect and really putting themselves in that place may be a lateral. It may even be kind of a step back, but it's only going to help. It's only going to help them, individually and as an organization, to kind of take that path. So it's, that's a lot of counseling that my teams and, I've done personally over the years is just about that. It's, what do you sort of enjoy doing most, and what are the things that you found that you're really good at doing? Find that sweet spot and really drive it forward. And you're going to be personally much happier, and the rewards always come along with that. Certainly on the for-profit side, and the nonprofit side, you're going to impact the mission even more.
Yeah. So two things I want to highlight there. Knowing your strengths, knowing yourself is an important part of humility, because then you're in a position to leverage those strengths and surround yourself with people who complement your areas of lesser talent. The other thing that I want to highlight is going back to your comment, Terry, about paying attention in the moment to your mindset. So you talked about, am I fighting this right now? I think that's really key, because that angst, that tension, checking in with that. Why am I feeling this angst or this tension? Is it because of my own selfishness? Is it because I am looking out for myself? Or am I fighting it because of other people or because of the organization? I think that's a really great question. What a practical way to check in with yourself to see where your mindset is.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point, and really it gets at self-reflection. I've counseled a lot of folks over the years, and certainly people on my team have too, where we see folks that are just really either dissatisfied or really just sort of disgruntled with the organization, with their place in it, with their role, unhappiness with, the fit for the job they're in, those kinds of things. And I think it's what you say is really super important. You've just got to be self-reflective and understand that you are unhappy, because I'll tell you a quick story. I ran into a colleague I hadn't seen in years the other day, working downtown Indianapolis, and so we had a chance to run into each other, which was really great. We got caught up, and but this person was just super unhappy, and they kind of had been for a while, and in just the course of talking through that, we both recognized that we both at points at our life had been unhappy in roles for different reasons, whether we really enjoyed either the money we were making or the impact we're having, but just really didn't have a good fit for the job, or maybe we worked for a boss that we just weren't a good fit for, or maybe the organization didn't stand for something that we believed in. Andrew, you just have to explore that. I mean, if there's some kind of tension in your work-life balance, whatever it may be, and that could be it. I mean, you could just be at a point in your career where you don't want to work that many hours anymore, and it's causing you sort of strife at home or just internal strife in that way. You do have to kind of dig into that and find out what those causes are. And I think, we've all been there at points in our lives, and I think it's sometimes you do just have to recognize that maybe it's just a short-term thing with your organization going through growth or going through transformation. Recognize that, or recognize that your job has kind of grown so much that it's sort of unwieldy, and it's causing you to have to work longer hours than you ever have in your life, and that's not something that you really want to do. Maybe it's time to approach your boss about a different structure or whatever. But I just think it's super important, just again, for good work-life balance, to just explore that, to say, why am I so unhappy in my job right now? Because there's just no sense in continuing on like that, especially if it's for a prolonged period of time. We live in an amazing society, especially now with so many new jobs being sort of foisted upon the country right now. It's part of what we do at Strada to analyze that. We have a research for the future of work that really sort of digs into what future jobs aren't even here right now, and how we can kind of prepare ourselves for the jobs that are coming and the impact on the workforce in the future and those kinds of things. And it's really super exciting time to be in the workforce, So I think it's really important to just sort of do those personal check-ins to find out, am I great with things that are going on? What really makes me happy? And how to sort of continually assess that and find roles that are important for you. And even more importantly, if this works for you, surround yourself with wonderful people, either on your team or a boss you really enjoy working with.
Well, so it all is connected, and I think that's a great closing point, is that it all starts with self-reflection, checking in with, where's my mindset? How am I feeling? Because the mindset and all of that is shaping everything we do, isn't it?
It sure is. I think these things are all related. We talk about leadership competencies that are important, whether we just sort of believe that certain leadership characteristics will, lead to corporate success, or or whether we believe that, in our search for sort of eternal, work happiness, that there are certain, strengths and things that we're really good at, that if we explore those, it'll just make us super effective and more happy at what we do. I do think it's important to continually look at that and find out, sort of where we can contribute most and what makes us the most happy. That's what it's all about.
So good. Well, Terry, thank you so much for being with us today. If our guests want to, or our listeners want to connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
Well, I'd be more than happy to connect with listeners. Either just shoot me an email at terry.holloway@stradaeducation.org. That's always the best way to find me, and more than happy to spend time with people that are sort of on this journey and exploring what's best with them. I'm happy to spend time with them.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast to never miss a Being at Work story.